4 moments, 4 leaders. One pattern that keeps repeating in modern U.S. history. Baghdad, 2003. The country that once got American intelligence briefings is now under American occupation. Hanoi, 1945. A Vietnamese leader quotes Thomas Jefferson and asks Washington for backing. Paris, 1966. France tells America to remove every soldier from French soil. Panama, 1989. American troops invade to capture a man who used to be on the CIA payroll. Some were proud generals. One was a paid spy on the CIA payroll. Another quoted the American Declaration of Independence in his own speeches, but each of them ended up on the wrong side of U.S. foreign policy. And the fallout from these breakups still shapes the world we live in. Let us start with a dictator who once received briefings from the CIA, Saddam Hussein, the dictator who went from American partner to public enemy number 1. Saddam Hussein was never really a true friend of the United States. He was what people in foreign policy circles call an ally of convenience. After the Iranian Revolution in 1979, the US needed someone to balance the new regime. When the Iran-Iraq War broke out in 1980, Washington saw an opening. On the surface, the United States stayed neutral in that war, but behind the scenes, American intelligence was already feeding Iraq satellite data. This happened even before official ties were set up in 1984. The CIA knew Iraq had a chemical weapons program. They looked the other way. Hurting Iran was the bigger goal. Everything else came second. But the war dragged on until 1988, and Iraq was left in ruins, especially financially. The country was buried in debt, and Saddam needed a way out. So in 1990, he made a fateful decision. He invaded neighboring Kuwait. That move flipped his relationship with America overnight. After negotiations collapsed, the US led a coalition of dozens of nations into the Gulf War. A month-long air campaign shredded Iraqi forces. When ground troops moved in, Iraq was beaten in a matter of days. The ally of convenience had become a full-blown enemy of the state. But the story was not over yet. Tensions carried on for more than a decade. After the 9/11 attacks, fears grew that Iraq was stockpiling weapons of mass destruction. In 2003, another US-led coalition rolled in to oust Saddam from power. By December that year, he was captured in a small hideout near Tikrit. He was placed on trial for crimes against humanity. In 2006, he was sentenced to death by hanging. He met that fate in December of that same year. 3 decades earlier, he had been getting briefings from the CIA. By the end, his fall became one of the defining moments of the modern Middle East. Next, a man whose speeches sounded shockingly American. All men are created equal, endowed by their creator with certain rights. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Sound familiar? No, that is not 1776. And it is not Thomas Jefferson speaking. Those words came from Ho Chi Minh in September 1945. He was born in Nguyen Sinh Cung in 1890 in what was then French Indochina. Today, we call that country Vietnam. After finishing his education, he took a job on a French steamship. That ship carried him around the world: Boston, New York, London, and Paris. In Paris, he became a nationalist who dreamed of freeing Vietnam from French rule. By the 1920s, he had embraced communism, but he never stopped fighting for independence. Then World War II broke out, and Japan invaded Indochina. Ho Chi Minh joined the resistance against the Japanese occupation, and here is the wild part. He worked alongside the OSS, the agency that became the CIA. American operatives trained and supplied his men. They were a constant headache for Japan. All those years overseas had given him real admiration for American ideals. On September 2nd, 1945, the day Japan officially surrendered, he made his move. He declared Vietnam an independent nation, free from France, and he opened his speech by quoting the American Declaration of Independence. He was practically begging for the United States to back his country. But when it came time to choose, Washington backed France instead. When France was pushed out of Vietnam in 1954, the country was split into two halves. The communist North belonged to Ho Chi Minh. The South was led by Ngo Dinh Diem. America threw its full weight behind the South. For Ho Chi Minh, this was the final betrayal. He had quoted Jefferson, asked for help, and been brushed off again and again. We all know what came next. Vietnam became one of the deadliest wars in American history. Now, Charles de Gaulle. There is no clean way to sum up this guy. Stubborn, brilliant, and a war hero. Above everything else, he loved France. And he was ready to go to extreme lengths to protect his country's pride. When Germany overran France in World War II, de Gaulle did not surrender. He fled into exile and helped build up the Free French forces from London. He set up a rival government to challenge the Vichy regime that worked with the Nazis. After Paris was liberated in 1944, he led two French governments before stepping down in 1946. But he was not done yet. In 1958, he came back as president of France. And that is when things between him and America got bumpy. France had already become one of the founding members of NATO back in 1949. On paper, NATO is an alliance between equal nations. But in real life, it runs on something called integrated command. One country calls the shots in any operation, and that country was the United States. Most allies were fine with that arrangement. De Gaulle was not. He had already watched France fall to the Nazis once. He was not going to be controlled again. To him, an alliance meant sharing plans and resources, not taking orders. In March 1966, he made his move. He told the US to pull every soldier out of France. The White House was caught totally off guard. They had thought de Gaulle wanted a slow drawdown over time, not an eviction notice. Secretary of State Dean Rusk reportedly snapped back, and those in our cemeteries too, but de Gaulle went even further. He pulled France out of NATO's integrated command. French troops would never again take orders from another country's general. France did not actually quit NATO. They just stayed in on their own terms. It took until 2009, more than 40 years later, for France to rejoin that command structure. And finally, meet a CIA informant who ran an entire country, then ran from US troops. Manuel Noriega. The Panama Canal might be the most valuable shortcut on Earth. Whoever runs Panama has the United States watching their every move. After a string of coups and power grabs, Noriega took control in 1983. And surprisingly, that was great news for Washington at first. For decades before becoming leader, Noriega had been a paid informant for American agencies. The CIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, you name it. They all had him on the payroll. Having their own guy running Panama, that was a huge intelligence win. Noriega backed the Contras, the rebels trying to topple the Sandinista government in Nicaragua. That pulled Panama into the Iran-Contra affair, which is a whole video on its own. He fed Washington intel on drug routes, money laundering, and rebel movements. He let the US use Panama as a base for operations across the region. And he got paid well for it. One source claims he pocketed $10,000 a month. But Noriega was loyal to no one. He played every side at once. He helped the Sandinistas when it suited him. He worked with Cuba when that paid better. The bigger problem, though, was the drug cartels. He was happy to line his pockets with cartel money. The US looked the other way for a while, but then the cracks started showing. When the Iran-Contra scandal broke, people accused Noriega of selling classified American tech. On top of that, the Canal Zone was set to return to Panama at the end of 1999. Suddenly, the man Washington once controlled was a serious liability. In 1988, a U.S. grand jury indicted him on drug trafficking charges, In 1989, he ignored the results of an election his opponent had clearly won. That was the breaking point. The US launched Operation Just Cause. Noriega ran to the Vatican embassy. US troops surrounded the building. He surrendered a few days later. In 1992, he was convicted in a US federal court. He spent decades behind bars before being returned to Panama, where he died in 2017. 4 leaders, 4 very different stories, one pattern that keeps coming back. Each one of them once stood beside America. Each one ended up against it. A close ally today can be in the crosshairs tomorrow. History keeps repeating that lesson. If you enjoyed this one, hit subscribe and turn on the bell for more like it.